Sandra arrived at Queen Mother's mansion in Maitama, her heart pounding in her chest. She had not been here since she completed the 7 night ritual. Back then, she was poor and desperate. Now, she was a millionaire. But as she stepped inside the grand mansion, she felt like that poor village girl again. Queen Mother sat in her usual place, on a large golden chair, wearing her usual flowing black gown. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold. Sandra swallowed hard. "You called me, Queen Mother?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Queen Mother nodded slowly. She gestured for Sandra to sit. Sandra obeyed. Then, after a long silence, Queen Mother finally spoke. "Sandra, do you think wealth is free?" Sandra's stomach tightened. She had heard these words before, the night she agreed to do the ritual. "No, Queen Mother," she whispered. Queen Mother leaned forward, her dark eyes piercing into Sandra. "Good, because the 7 day ritual was just the first stage." Sandra froze. "First stage?" she whispered. Queen Mother nodded. "To keep your wealth, you must renew your power every month." Sandra felt dizzy. "What do you mean by renew?" Queen Mother's face remained calm, but her next words shattered Sandra's world. "You must walk naked from the 1st to the 3rd of every month, from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Sandra's heart stopped. She couldn't breathe. She felt like someone had poured cold water on her body. "What? What did you say?" she stammered. Queen Mother's eyes did not blink. "If you want to keep your money, your cars, your house, your lifestyle, you must do it. Every month, it is time for your first renewal ritual." Sandra covered her mouth with her hands. Her whole body shook. She had never expected this. The first time she told herself it was only 7 days. Now she had to do it every single month. Forever, she stared at Queen Mother. "What if I refuse?" Queen Mother's face remained blank, but her next words sent fear rushing through Sandra's body. "Then, everything you have will disappear. Your money, your cars, your house, gone. You will return to the suffering you came from, and this time you will suffer more than before." Sandra felt like the room was spinning. She had worked too hard to get here. She had sacrificed too much to turn back now. Her mind screamed, "No!" But her heart whispered, "Do you want to be poor again?" Sandra closed her eyes. She already knew the answer. "When do I start?" she asked. Queen Mother's lip curved into a small smile. "Tonight," she said. Sandra sat in Queen Mother's mansion, her hands shaking as she held the small bottle of oil. Queen Mother's voice was calm but firm. "Rub this all over your body before walking. It will protect you from being recognized." Sandra stared at the bottle, her stomach twisted in fear. She had already done the 7 day ritual. She had already sold her soul for money, but now she had to do this every month. Her throat felt dry. "What if someone sees me?" she whispered. Queen Mother's face remained expressionless. "They will see you, but they won't recognize you. The oil will cover your face in their eyes." Sandra swallowed hard. She wanted to scream, "No!" She wanted to run away. But when she thought of her mansion, her cars, her private university, her luxury lifestyle, she knew she had no choice. She could not go back to poverty. Slowly, she uncorked the bottle and poured the oil into her hands. It was thick and black. It had a strange smell, a mix of rotten fruits and burnt wood. Sandra closed her eyes and rubbed the oil all over her body. Her skin felt hot, like tiny invisible ants were crawling over her. She shivered, but she said nothing. Queen Mother nodded in approval. "Now, Go from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Walk the streets. Do not run. Do not hide. And do not speak to anyone. Sandra took a deep breath. Then with heavy steps, she walked out into the night. Months after months, Sandra repeated the ritual. She rubbed the oil. She walked naked. She returned home, and every month it broke her more and more. She no longer felt like a powerful, wealthy woman. She felt empty. She felt lost. Even with all her money, luxury, and fame, peace left her life. She barely slept at night. She stopped attending school regularly. She avoided Amaka. She stopped smiling. Whenever she looked in the mirror, she no longer saw Sandra, the village girl who worked hard for a better life. She saw a stranger, a lost soul, a slave to wealth. Sandra sat in her luxurious mansion, surrounded by golden chandeliers, expensive furniture, and designers' bags. But she felt empty. The past months have been hell. Every month, she walked naked on the streets from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. like a ghost, a slave to the ritual. At first, she convinced herself it was worth it. She had money, power, and fame. But what was the point of all this if she had no peace? Sandra barely slept at night. She had nightmares of people pointing at her, laughing, whispering, calling her a mad woman. She had everything money could buy, yet she had lost herself. She avoided people. She stopped attending school. She could no longer look in the mirror without seeing a broken soul. Even Amaka, the only friend she had, noticed something was wrong. Sandra, what is happening? You have everything, yet you look like someone suffering. Sandra only forced a smile and said nothing, because deep inside she was suffering. She had never felt so lonely in her life. Then one evening, everything changed. Sandra sat on the floor of her bedroom, her knees pressed against her chest. Tears poured down her face. She had just come back from her monthly ritual and she felt like a walking corpse. Her hands shook as she wiped her tears. Then suddenly she froze. A thought entered her mind, a thought that made her sit up, a thought that made her breathe heavily. I won't do it again. Sandra's heart pounded. She said it again. I won't do it again. The words felt powerful. For the first time in months, she felt alive. What was the point of all this money if she had no peace? What was the point of wealth if she had lost herself? She had suffered poverty before, but at least back then she had her dignity. Now she had everything, but she felt like nothing. Sandra stood up, wiped her tears. Enough was enough. She would rather lose all her money than continue being a slave to this ritual. She would rather be poor and free than rich and miserable. She picked up her phone and dialed Queen Mother's number. It was time to end this once and for all. Sandra's fingers shook as she pressed Queen Mother's number. The phone rang once, twice, then Queen Mother picked up. Her voice was calm but cold. Sandra, to what do I owe this call? Sandra swallowed hard. Her throat felt dry. She took a deep breath and said the words she had been afraid to say. I'm done. There was silence. Then Queen Mother's voice changed. It was no longer calm. It was angry. What did you just say? Sandra's chest tightened. Her voice was stronger this time. I said I won't do it again. No more rituals. No more walking naked. I want my life back. A sharp, cold laugh came from the other end of the phone. Queen Mother chuckled like she had just had a joke. Then her voice became dark and serious. Sandra, you think you can just walk away? Sandra's breathing quickened. I don't care. I don't want this money anymore. Queen Mother's voice grew sharper. You don't make the rules, Sandra. We gave you wealth, and we can take it back. If you stop the ritual, you will regret it. Sandra's hands turned to fists. She was tired of being afraid. She had made up her mind. Take it back! I don't care! She shouted and ended the call. She threw the phone on the bed and took a deep breath. For the first time in months, she felt free, but she had no idea what was about to happen next. The next morning, Sandra's phone rang. It was a call from her university. She picked up. The voice on the other end was serious. Miss Sandra, your admission has been terminated. You are no longer a student of this institution. Sandra froze. Her hands became cold. What? Why? We were given strict orders. Your name has been removed from our records. The line went dead. Sandra collapsed on her bed. Her head spun. Queen Mother had started her punishment. That was just the beginning. That same afternoon, she went to withdraw money from her bank. The ATM swallowed her card. She rushed into the bank to complain. The banker checked her details, then looked at her with a strange expression. Madam, your account has been frozen. You have no access to your money. Sandra's knees became weak. What do you mean? That's impossible. The banker shook his head. Your money is gone, madam. Sandra's heart pounded. Her millions were gone. Everything she had worked for was gone. She left the bank in shock. Her head was hot. She told herself, at least I still have my house. But when she returned home that evening, she found her house under lock and key. A notice was pasted on the gate. Property seized. Owner no longer permitted to enter. Sandra stood there, staring at the sign. Her whole body shook. She had lost everything. Her admission, her money, her house, everything was gone. She had no one to turn to. She had no other option. She ran to the only place she could think of, Amaka's house. Sandra stayed with Amaka, but she was no longer herself. She was a shadow of who she used to be. She barely spoke. She barely ate. She would sit on the bed all day staring at the wall. She was empty. She was lost. And then the worst thing happened. Every night at exactly 9 p.m., Sandra found herself standing up. Her feet would move on their own. She would walk out of the house. She would walk the streets naked. She had said she wouldn't do the ritual anymore, but now her body was forcing her. She had no control. People in the neighborhood started noticing. They would see a beautiful, rich-looking girl walking the streets completely naked every night. They whispered, they gossiped, they pointed at her and shook their heads. But Sandra had no power to stop it. She would walk from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. like a possessed person. Then, as soon as the clock struck 10 p.m., she would regain control and run back to Amaka's house, crying. Amaka was terrified. Sandra, what is happening to you? This is not normal, oh. Sandra's lip trembled. Her voice was weak. I don't know, Amaka. I don't know, but I think I'm cursed. I'm so scared. Tears rolled down her face. She was no longer Sandra the rich girl. She was Sandra the lost soul, and she had no idea how to escape. Amaka couldn't take it anymore. She had watched Sandra lose herself completely. Every night, exactly at 9 p.m., Sandra would stand up like someone controlled by something and walk the streets naked. She had no control. She didn't talk much. She barely ate. She was just there, a shadow of who she used to be. Amaka knew this was beyond her. Sandra needed help, and there was only one person who truly cared about her, her mother. One morning, Amaka packed Sandra's things in a small bag, held her by the hand, and took her to the motor park. Sandra didn't argue. She just followed her like a lost child. The journey from Abuja to Nasarawa felt long. Sandra stared out of the window, her eyes empty. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't even care. Amaka just held her hand and prayed that this decision was the right one. When they got to Nasarawa, Amaka took Sandra straight to her mother's house. The moment Sandra's mother saw her daughter, she burst into tears. "Oh my God, Sandra, my child!" She rushed to hug her, but Sandra just stood there, blank-faced. Her mother stepped back and looked at her properly. She saw the dark circles under her daughter's eyes. She saw the way she had lost weight, and then she knew. She knew from the moment she saw Sandra that the money wasn't clean. That was why she refused it the first time Sandra came home with wealth. She knew it wasn't genuine. Now she was seeing the consequences. She wiped her tears and turned to Amaka. "What happened to my daughter?" Amaka sighed deeply and explained everything. The working at night, the Queen Mother, the ritual, and how Sandra started losing everything after she stopped. Sandra's mother clapped her hands together and shook her head. "I warned her. I told her not to take money that she did not work for." Tears filled her eyes again, but she swung into action immediately. She would not let her daughter die like this. She had to find a solution. Sandra's mother started asking around for help. She didn't take her daughter to a hospital. She knew that this was not a normal sickness. People directed her to a powerful herbalist in the village who was so good with herbs. The next day, Sandra's mother carried her daughter on a motorcycle and took her deep into the village where the herbalist stayed. The place was quiet. Trees surrounded the small mud house, and an old man with a long grey beard sat outside waiting for them. As soon as he saw Sandra, he nodded slowly. "She has eaten from the devil's pot," he said. Sandra's mother fell to her knees. "Please, please help my daughter." The herbalist sighed and told them that Sandra needed serious cleansing. The things she had done could not be erased overnight, but if she followed the process, she would get her freedom. Sandra just stood there, emotionless. Her mind was too broken to react. The herbalist started giving Sandra herbs and special medicine to cleanse her system. Every morning and evening, she drank the bitter mixture. It was disgusting, but her mother made sure she took it. She also started praying over Sandra every day. "You will not die. You will not be lost, my child. You will come back to me." She and the herbalist always told Sandra one thing: do not be afraid. That was the most important part. Queen Mother had used fear to keep Sandra in control. Now they were trying to break that fear. At first, Sandra felt nothing. Sandra and her mother prayed consistently. The first few weeks were tough. She had nightmares, felt a strong pull to return to Abuja, but she held on. But as days passed, something changed. She started hearing less and less of the strange voices in her head. She started feeling like a human being again. She started eating better, and most importantly, she started sleeping without waking up to walk naked at 9 p.m. Weeks passed. Sandra's mother never left her side. She bathed her, fed her, and prayed consistently. Sandra slowly started talking again. She started smiling a little. She started responding when people spoke to her. The healing was slow, but it was happening. One day, as Sandra and her mother sat under a tree, Sandra turned to her mother with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Mama, I am sorry." Her mother pulled her into a tight hug and said, "You are my child. I love you no matter what." For the first time in a long time, Sandra felt peace. She still had a long way to go, but she knew one thing: she was finally free. Sandra stayed close to her mother's side. For the first time in years, she felt safe. No more fear, no more nightmares, no more running. She was finally home. Sandra's mother never treated her differently. She didn't remind her of her past. She didn't blame her. Instead, she taught her how to live again. Sandra started helping her mother in the little farm they had behind the house. Every morning, she woke up early, tilled the soil, and planted crops. It wasn't easy. She wanted to start afresh, and this time she wanted to do it the right way. As months passed, Sandra and her mother started selling some of the farm produce in the village markets. It wasn't much, but they managed to save a little money. Sandra no longer cared about living a flashy life. She had seen what quick wins could do. This time, she wanted genuine success. So she worked hard. Every single day, she and her mother prayed together every morning, thanking God for life. Little by little, Sandra started dreaming again. She remembered how much she had always wanted to go to school. She wanted to learn, grow, and have a better future. One day, after a long day at the farm, her mother sat her down and said, Sandra, I have been saving for you. It's not much, but it's enough to start something. If you still want to go to school, you can apply. Sandra broke down in tears. She couldn't believe it. After everything she had done, after all the mistakes, her mother still believed in her. That night, she made a decision. She was going to school. She was going to rewrite her story. Sandra applied to a polytechnic in Nasarawa State. A few months later, she got admission. She wasn't going to a big private university like before. She wasn't going to drive a flashy car or live in luxury. But she didn't care. This time, she was doing things the right way. She rented a small room close to school, continued helping her mother on weekends, and focused on her studies. She worked hard. She made genuine friends. And for the first time in her life, she had peace. Sandra's story is a lesson to many young people today. There are no shortcuts to success. If money comes too fast, ask yourself, at what cost? Sandra chased quick wealth, but in the end, it almost destroyed her life. Not everyone is lucky enough to escape. If you are thinking of taking shortcuts to wealth, stop. If you are in a situation where people are pressuring you to make money the wrong way, remember Sandra's story. There is no shame in starting small. There is no shame in struggling at first. It is better to work hard and sleep in peace than to live in fear of losing everything. Sandra got a second chance, but not everyone will. Choose wisely. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share. What are your thoughts on Sandra's story? Drop a comment below. Thank you for watching the end.